maintaining mount. After we get to mount, we'll talk through a couple things, and we'll maintaining mount, and we'll talk into attacking. And for what it's worth, before we start going down this road, I think that we have a tendency in jiu-jitsu, especially early on and all the way up until probably for a lot of people, almost brown belt level, I think you focus on the end result, right? Which is I get to mount and I get obsessed, and I spend most of my time thinking about submissions and perfecting submissions, and the end is what's always in mind. And to a large degree, I think we don't do a good job of emphasizing it in the way that we structure teaching and the curriculum, because everybody wants to see the shiny submissions, right? The end goal, and nobody wants to see what really matters, which is the thing that matters is my ability to stay here, right? If I can't maintain mount, if I can't keep mount, I don't care how many submissions you ever spend your time learning, and I don't care how much time you spend at the beginning of class drilling only submissions. If you can't stay in the dominant positions, it will never matter, right? So I constantly try and encourage people, especially, those of you out here that are white belt and through blue belt and beyond, shift your mindset, right? And if you are drilling, when we do drilling, you get to mount. If you mount, you get to mount on somebody who's better than you or a higher belt than you. Just focus on staying there, right? Spend 30 seconds, a minute, just maintaining mount. And whether you catch a submission or not, that's a win, right? If I mount Rob and I stay on Rob's mount for 30 seconds, I'm going to rub his face in it for the next 12 months, right? That's a win. So get to mount, maintain mount. What do I mean, right? So we get to mount, we get here. The first thing, we'll start with like a level 1, which is I'm low, right? My hands are out wide. My head is more or less in line with his head. Because the thing about maintaining mount, it's very easy for me to maintain mount as long as I think about keeping the structure of my body more or less in line with the structure of his body, right? And I guess what I mean is like, spine to spine. I like to have my head a little bit over the top of his head. And what you guys probably can't see from here is that my knees are off the ground, right? If I get to mount and I want to maintain mount, my feet come together like I'm praying, my hands are out wide, my shoulders, my core, everything's super relaxed, my knees are off the ground. So from here, Turner's getting about as much of my weight as I could possibly put on him. And the more relaxed you are, the better, right? Be kind of like a blanket mentality here. So I just think about draping myself over Turner if I'm really focused on maintaining mount and nothing else right now. So, from here, he's got all my weight. I'm not giving him any space to do anything. If he wanted to try and push me off, do whatever, right? It doesn't take much for me to just stay here because I don't even let him get started. All right? So, again, this way, and we'll turn around and let you guys see like what the feet together, then we'll build on some hooks. But again, like philosophically, if I'm mounted, when I mount, Hodger was here and he showed this like be high or be low. And I agree with a lot of that, right? So, if I'm high here, you can do the, Hodger was like ride the horse, ride the bull or whatever thing he talked about. I do like a lot of that. If you want to play a little bit more, open. But if I'm serious about keeping mount, I want to maintain mount, I don't stay here. I get low, right? I'm relaxed, feet together, hands out wide, and everything again. I'm just thinking about draping myself over him. I think about keeping my head slightly over the top of his head, spine in line with his spine, right? My hips are square over the top of his hips. We'll turn around so you guys can see. Feet together, knees off the mat. All right? Here. How much weight, Turner? How much of my weight here? 70-75%. Yeah, that's probably about right. Right? Again, if my knees go on the mat, how much now? Like 30, right? My knees are on the mat, my hands are on the mat. Now we're back here, right? This is maintaining mount. And again, if you get really good at maintaining mount, submissions open up, right? Because it sucks so bad eventually Turner just thinks, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get out of here. They start making mistakes, submissions fall in line. So for now, we'll just start here, right? Put your feet together, knees off the ground, kind of floating on them. Relax, get yourself relaxed. And, guy on bottom, person on bottom. If you feel like you're not getting all of what they can give you, just tell them that, right? Be a good partner and tell them, like, hey, man, feel a little bit light or whatever, right? So do that for a few minutes, we'll move on. We'll talk about a couple things now. We'll layer in the next level. I think mostly not white belts in here. I think at this point, it seems like most everybody in here has already seen the, like, scoop the head, hand out, right? If you haven't, pull me aside, I'll come show you that. We'll layer that in. So what I will talk about here is hooks and hips, right? We say hooks, right? But we say that to try and teach you a way to engage your hip, right? Because when you're making the hook helps obviously keep you attached. But what really, really matters is when I make a hook, I dial my hips in. And from mount, hooks and hips, it reminds me a lot of, like, learning how to drive a car, right? When you start learning how to drive a car, every correction you make is an overcorrection. And you have this series of, like, I'm drifting this way, I come back this way. I'm drifting this way, I come back this way, right? Until eventually you dial those back in, you dial those back in, you dial those back in. And even when you're driving now, after 20 years, 30 years, you're still making the corrections to the steering wheel on the road. They're smaller and you just don't notice it anymore. Your hip movement to mount, that should be what you try and get to, right? You try and get to where you're constantly turning your hips in as you feel them turning over one way or another, and you're doing it only as much as you need to do it and without thinking about it. And when you get to that level of staying mounted on somebody, you're doing pretty good for yourself in here, right? And that's when people will start describing your mount game as sticky and heavy, and he constantly does these things, or whatever, right? And that's what it is. It's just you're adjusting to what they're feeling, you're feeling in their hips, and you're doing it before they even get started on a big explosive escape movement, so that they don't even get, like, space going, right? When I'm mounted, and really when I'm on top anywhere, top guard, top side body, top mount, I kind of boil it down to my line of thinking is this, right? I want to take as much space away from my opponent as possible. He wants to create as much space. And I apply that, everything from shoulders all the way down, right? So we're here, right? Again, I'm not going to talk about scooping the head. I think we've seen that now. But what I will talk about is, if I feel Turner try and start going in this direction, right, immediately I'm making this little adjustment with a hook and dialing my hip in. Same thing, we go to the other side here, right? I don't even let him get started. I don't even let him have the space. We'll turn around, head this direction. You guys can kind of see the footwork and the hip movement. And again, the footwork, I want to lead with my feet and keep my hooks going. But what really, really matters is the hips. And it's so much so, right? Like, even if I don't make this attachment, but I dial my hip in, roll this direction, right? No, you're not going, right? Now, right? The hips matter, right? So what I'm doing here, as I feel Turner start to go, my hips dial into him. I don't even let him get going. This is what you guys want to start getting to, right? The ability to dial your hips, shut his down, that's what matters. And again, the details, I think, of the mount matter. More so, obviously, the more of a size discrepancy that there becomes. For me, my preference when I'm mounted, even if I stay, in kind of this low mount, the reason I said earlier what I said about head this direction, when I'm here, I try and keep my head slightly above his head, right? The reason I do that is because it keeps my hips off being directly on top of his hips. So if he bumps me now, right, I'm moving a lot more. If I'm here and he bumps, significantly less. right? So if you're going with somebody and they're a lot bigger than you and you get to mount, the more I can keep my hips off the top of his hips, the more successful I'll be at staying on mount, right? Because I have to deal with less of the explosiveness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Did you guys see the toggling the hips? You guys see that? All right. Let's do that a few times. We'll move on. One more little pro tip I think that will help, especially again, if there's a size disparity. And then we'll talk about the last slice, which is, how to put the hand in the collar and how to maintain mount, with a hand in the collar, right, which is a relatively committed position for attack there. So for me, again, when I get serious about, staying on mount, one of the things that I will get to is behind the head, right? And if I get behind your head or under your head, and especially if I can lift it up off the mat, I'm going to take this every single time, right? This shuts down a lot of his ability to kind of start bridge and do the upa now, right? Like you can see the head on the upa bridge now, right? Yeah, you see this, and if I'm here, right, very, very limited. And one other little, additional tip is if I get under, my hand, all the way up here, is not just kind of dangling free, right? I like to attach it to something. If I can get here and cap it off on his shoulder, right? Just to reinforce, this really makes it awful for Turner, right? This sucks. Huh? Yeah, and it helps a lot, right? Helps you keep this. And that little under the head, behind the head, you get that concept down. I think about glue in their chin, right here, their chest. That you'll see that in a lot of other places, right? If we were, let's just say we're having a little bit more loose and fast. I'm high, and I sort of put my hand in, and Turner does the thing where both hands come to my hips, right? And he starts trying to escape from here. I'm immediately going to try and come behind his head and attach myself here, right? So that's just a little additional. You guys aren't paying for that, right? That's a Christmas generosity. So, all right, let's talk about here. Again, we're low, we're doing whatever, and I'm saying, okay, I've been on mount for 30 seconds, a minute, whatever it is you feel comfortable with. Let's see, let's try and get to a place now where I can maintain mount with a hand in the collar, right? So open the collar, set the hand in. I guess we'll talk through a couple things thought process here, right? My hand is on the collar, my fist stays on the ground, right? I want my knuckles touching the ground, I want my left hand out wide. And here, I think about my head placement as being just still over the top, but just to the left. And the reason why is because as soon as I put this hand in the collar, I know that the only way he's going to be able to upa is in this direction, right? So from here, again, back is relaxed, hips are relaxed, because I don't have to be fast toggling the motion of my hips. I just have to be there first, okay? So I don't have to be fast. I just have to be there before him. So there's a couple things that work in my advantage as long as you understand this position. And what I mean is I dial myself off to this side so that most of my weight, it's not impossible, but it would be very hard for him to upa me all the way over in this direction now, right? Which is the way that he would want to go, because now I have my right hand committed. So I'm going to cheat a little bit to the left and my hips stay relaxed. And if I feel him start to bridge, I dial my hips and I'm already here, right? I'm already shutting it down. He's got nowhere to go, all right? So as soon as I commit my right hand, those are the things I'm thinking through, right? I'm putting myself in a position where I can stay here and work an attack later, right? So again, I'm here, knees off the ground, my hips are neutral, he goes to bridge, I toggle my hips and I'm here, right? My hand is still free. I don't have to commit it to post, right? Because I've got good hip movement here and I'm shutting it all down, right? So just feel that. You get good on one side, switch it up here. Do both sides. The other thing, lastly, we say knuckles on the ground. One, you got to have knuckles on the ground. We teach it in the context of finishing the collar choke, right? You don't really, where it's very difficult to finish the collar choke if I start here, right? But what I also believe is that knuckles on the ground and keeping them heavy helps me shut down, the UPA in the other direction, right? My arm is straight here. My knuckles are on the ground. I'm more or less pinning this shoulder to the ground in this way. If I relax and go here, I got nothing now, right? You've given him back that UPA. So that's the other additional kind of, call it hidden benefit, I think, of keeping the knuckles on the ground here, staying heavy, right? I don't even let that shoulder get started. So from my perspective, I'm shutting down one whole side of his body. I'm shutting his shoulder movement down. I'm toggling my hips in to keep his hips glued to the ground. He's got nothing, right? And that's going to come into play next slice. Questions? All right, let's do it. A lot of times for me, I'll mount somebody, immediately put my hand in the collar, and I just spend time here because for me, a lot of times rolling, the details of this position, the little, especially against, some of the better guys in here, I care more about feeling the nuances of staying here than I do, even when I see, a submission. Now, if it's, if I'm rolling with like a blue belt, 2-stripe blue belt or Colby, I'm going to take that submission, right? Because they need to learn. So some of those are instructive, but so what I'm trying to say is spend time here, right? Spend time here, and also don't care if I get, rolled from here, right? I do care if I don't know why I got rolled. That's a waste of everybody's time. If I mount and I put my hand in the collar and I'm really paying attention to the position, right? And he sweeps me, he, elbow escape, trap and roll, gets out from here. I want to know why, right? And I want to know why, especially if, I go to the second partner, the third partner, and it's the same thing that happens, right? On a variety of different training partners. That's valuable information, right? Even if you lose the mount, that's valuable information for your progression, down the road. So get to mount, stay there for a minute, put a hand in the collar, and work from here, right? And it matters, again, because if I put my hand in the collar, it forces me to get better with my hips and my hooks, right? I'm less reliant on my upper body, which is a significantly better place to get to, because that translates to, if I'm in a fight, can I maintain mount and punch this person in the face, right? That's what collar chokes are. And always keep that frame of reference. So we'll spend a few minutes. We'll talk through, because I know, everybody wants to see the end result. So we'll talk about the second hand, right? And I'll show you guys what I think is the most common way that I land the second hand and finish the choke. And it builds on everything that we've spent the last 45 minutes talking about, right? Which is, here, I'm low, I've got really good body. I'm setting myself up for the second hand to land. And what I'm setting myself up for it to land in is a failed, eventually, I know you can stay here and cook your opponent long enough. He's going to get desperate. He's going to try, a bridge, a trap and roll, something halfway, right? And so I already know that's not going to work, right? I know it's not going to work because I know I'm in good position from start to finish. And so when he goes, right, for this, and on the way back down, he fails, this whole space is cleared for the second hand, right? And if I just grab the fabric, if I get thumb in, whatever, right? And I'm not even going to talk about finishing the choke right now. We're only going to talk about landing the second hand. So I'm here, my hand's out. I already post it here and come straight across on his way back down, right? I already knew that trap and roll was going to fail because I knew he was doing it out of desperation, and he was desperate because I had good top position on the mount and kept it there for 30 seconds, a minute, however long, until he starts making mistakes, right? So my knuckles are on the ground. My left hand is posted here. My knees are off the ground, but my hips are relaxed. I feel him. I even see him look. I already know. Dialing my hips in, right? I know it's going to fail. My hand cheats over, and I catch it on the way down. Okay? I don't know percentage-wise how many times that's how I catch a collar choke. Yeah, it's more than 90%. That's how I set the second hand and finish the collar choke. That's the most common way. All right? So do that a few more minutes. We'll call it a day.